What's up, guys? Julian here with a response video for the whole iFlyIllini versus Raw Instinct um, catastrophe that's happened. I don't know if it's a catastrophe on YouTube. I just want to comment on it from an outsider's view more than anything. I don't. I played Call of Duty a little bit. I used to play like a year ago. I had like this podcast. It was kind of fun. But I'm not like a huge Call of Duty person. I'm not in the Call of Duty. Oh, I forgot to turn off Facebook. Sorry, guys. I bet half of you just went and checked your Facebook right now. Because that's what happens. Okay, live TV. So yeah, I'm not hugely in the Call of Duty community. I subscribe to people on YouTube and have a good time, but not really. I'm in Magic and StarCraft 2. That's kind of my genre. Now I have a friend of mine who's got a channel, Glory Gamers, and he knows iFlyIllini directly, and he actually told me about this about a week before iFly posted this video, just saying, hey man, iFly's going to call this guy out, it's going to be big news. So I went over and subscribed to iFly and waited for the video to come out, and I watched it, all about Raw Instinct and the things that he's doing. I'm assuming that you've already watched that video, so I'm not going to paraphrase it here. But, so I watched that video, and then I knew that if I just watched that video, and I didn't know who Raw Instinct was before this video, right? If I just watched that and then just did my response from there, I knew that that wouldn't be sufficient, and then it wouldn't be accurate. And that's something that I really wanted to talk about a little bit about right here, because a lot of the response videos to iFly's video are just they're very quick. They're very like hastily made when people are angry and they're emotional, and then they're making this content and they're yelling it and calling Ryan String this and that and saying to spam his channel and do horrible things to him. And that's not what needs to be done, right? First of all, you got to gather all the sides. You got to at least do your own research before you make a decision on how you're going to act from there. And secondly, if you decide that Ryan Instinct is guilty or whatever of making these videos, of copying this content, then you need to do it. Then you need to unsubscribe from his channel. You need to stay away from him. And you don't need to start spamming his channel or making his life horrible. Or I would not be surprised if he's gotten phone calls or death threats, or because the internet seems to blow up like that. And that's not what needs to happen. People need to calm down, right? They need to relax a little bit, think about it rationally, and then make rational decisions. So let's talk about these videos for a second. First, I want to talk about iFly's video. Then I'm going to talk about this podcast that iFly was a little bit on, the Bad Kids Show podcast. And then we'll talk about TeamNoble and his video as well. So let's talk about iFly's video. The first thing that I noticed, not the first, the biggest thing I noticed, because I think that this situation could have been avoided or at least toned down, was the whole like thing, you know, and Raw Instinct liking a video of iFly's. Now, so this all started, again, if you watch the video, you'd know that that Raw Instinct borrowed some content or some ideas from iFly, and then promised that in return, because iFly called him out on it, he would like one of iFly's videos and give iFly a whole bunch of views and a whole bunch of subs and things like that, which is a way that the big YouTubers can help out the smaller YouTubers, and he didn't do it. And iFly, in this situation, if I was iFly, if I were to be able to go back in time and talk to him, I would tell him to just drop it. You know, I mean, Raw Instinct is a douchebag in this situation, because now here's the issue. Here's why Raw Instinct is in the error, is because he told iFly that he would do it, right? If iFly would have said, "How about you like one of my videos?" and Raw Instinct would have said, "I don't think so. Let's look for another solution." Right? Then okay, then they move on. But Raw Instinct said, yeah, I'll do that. And then he didn't do it. And in iFly's shoes, in iFly's situation, iFly has to say, man, what a douchebag. All right, let's move on. Right? And you just have to ignore it. But iFly even said that he still helped out Raw Instinct, that he still gave him tips for his tips and tricks videos, that he still was in communication with him, and they talk about other things. Well, it's kind of like when you lend your friend $20. You lend him $20, right? And now, unfortunately, it's a sad thing, but it's the truth. You're the bad guy if you ask for that $20 over and over again. Even though it's yours. Even though your friend said he would pay you back. If you want to keep the friendship, you can't ask for the $20 anymore. And if you want to stay friends and keep hanging out with him, that's great. Now, in iFly Raw Instinct situation, it's a little bit different. This is more like, now, I don't know how to relate it to the $20 thing in this way, but they just need to stop chatting. If iFly needs to take him out of his Skype and just not talk about him anymore and just move on with his life. Maybe make this video anyway. You know, probably make the video about Ryan Instinct copying his content. But just forget this like thing. Just move on with your life. You know, you don't need to keep bugging him and bugging him and bugging him about it. Kind of like when you ask a girl out, and you're like, hey, what about this Friday? And she's like, maybe I'll text you. And then you text her on Friday morning, and she's like, I don't know, let me see what happens after school. And then you text her at noon, and she's like, well, I still haven't figured out what my plans are. You text her again at 4, and you're like, well, how about we go out and see a movie? And then she's like, no, I'm kind of busy right now, maybe later tonight. And then you text her at 8, and you're like, let's go get some ice cream. And she's like, I just got back from work, and I'm really busy. You text her at 10, right? Like, do you see what's happening here? Even she should just say no to you, but you need to take that hint. Even if she hasn't said no, you gotta take the hit and be like, all right, I'm done. Like, this sucks, but that happened to me. I was the chump. It was like a year ago. And I was the guy that kept texting and kept trying, and you just gotta drop it after a while. And that's what iFly should have done. He should be like, hey, like this video, man. You said you would. And the guy's like, yeah, I'll do it later. Maybe ask him one more time. Hey, did you forget? I know you said you were gonna like this video. I'd really appreciate it if you did that. That would really help me out. And if he says, yeah, I'll get to it eventually. Fine, whatever. Just drop it. It's over. But other than that, I agree with what your video is showing, right? I saw the similarities, and I tried to go back and watch some videos. And going back that far on YouTube is kind of tough when there's so many videos in there, but I saw the similarities. I saw how he had taken exactly what you showed, same guns and same maps and same progression in his videos, and taken them from iFly and from T Martin, and probably from other YouTubers as well. That's pretty scumbaggy. He shouldn't have done that. And yeah, anyway, I'm going to go to what I think about it later. But let's move on to this podcast. Well, before that, let's move on to this. There was this video that TeamNoble put out. I don't know, the guy's name was Keezer or something. He's on the Bad Kid Show podcast as well. I watched his whole video, and then he took his video, and then so I watched his whole video. Then I watched the podcast, which is about 50 minutes, just under an hour. Then I went back to rewatch his video because I wanted to just taking notes, and just writing down things I know what to talk about right now. And he pulled it. Please. Come on, man. You said some pretty bold things there. And you shouldn't have pulled it. So I'm going to give you a little recap of basically what his video was about. What's up, bitches? iFly, you a bitch. Your video was a bitch too. You know why? I'll tell you why. Because nobody don't own nothing to nobody. YouTube's a cutthroat business, man. Just like Game of Thrones. Everyone's stabbing each other in the back. You don't got to shout out nobody. You know why? Because you don't own this game, brother. You don't own it. You're like a news anchor, like on Fox 13, Bill O'Reilly, some shit like that. You steal somebody else's content? Who cares, bitches? We're not here for the dollar bills, y'all. Okay, now that we've gotten that out of our system, let's move on to the Bad Kid Show podcast, which hopefully is still up by the time my video comes out. So here's my first thing I thought there. It sounds like, now I wasn't there, right? But it sounds like you gave iFly no warning. That you just called him because of the kind of it sounds. Where he's like, hey iFly, hey, so we have Raw Instinct on here. We're gonna do this podcast. We want to have you guys talk about what's going on, okay? And iFly's like, what? Like, I need some more info. What's going on right now? And that, I think, is a very accurate response. Because then iFly then said no. He said he was busy. He made an excuse, and excuses or whatever. But I would probably do the same thing, right? It's kind of like, again, I use these metaphors. I'm just trying to liken it to other things so you guys can understand a little bit better, hopefully. But, like, if your manager, like at work, calls you in, and he's like, hey, do you remember your break from 3.5 weeks ago on Sunday? And you're kind of like, oh, why? Right? That's kind of your first response is like, why do I need to remember this? Or like if someone says, hey, this or whatever, and you think you might be in trouble or you think there's something shady going on, you should just kind of go, why do you care? Like just kind of be very careful. That was a bad example what I gave before. Ignore that. But you gotta be very careful about what you do or what you say or when someone brings it up like that. They definitely should have given him some notice. At least 24 hours, if not more. And I said, hey, iFly, we would like to call you at 8 o'clock Central Time or whatever. We would like to have Raw Instinct on, and we would like to talk about this video. We're not attacking you as a group. We want you two to talk, and we want to moderate, and just be able to get this out in the open and get it fleshed out. Not to, or whatever, maybe 8 hours notice, but at least before you call him, at least give him some notice and make sure you can do it. Because then you make him sound like the bad guy. What if he really was busy? What if he really was? What if he was on a Skype call with somebody else? Or what if, I don't know what. But you got to give him the benefit of that out there a little bit, right? Because then he was worried, he was nervous, and he wasn't prepared. And a lot of people, when they're not prepared, they don't want to talk about it. And that's a completely normal thing. So he's not a bitch for just backing out like that. That was a little bit lame. The name calling, I don't know. I mean, like the attacking the person is not what you want to be doing. I saw some of that in response videos for Ron Stink as well, attacking who he is and attacking the way he sounds and attacking the font that he uses for his videos and you don't need to do any of that. That's fine. I mean, everyone does things differently. Don't attack that. You can get at like his content in terms of that he took it from somebody else. But you can't just bash him for the way he makes his videos in general. Like that's not what we're trying to do. That's not the purpose here. Okay, so back to this podcast thing. So now at the same time, iFly could have been more direct. Instead of making excuses, well, I'm busy, well, not right now. He should have just said, guys, I'm really not interested in talking about it right now. I would appreciate it if you'd watch the video, pay attention to the video, and if you have a response, you can make the response. But I don't feel the need to talk about it here. I feel like I've said everything I'm going to say, and that's the end of it. Done, and just cut it off. And then that way they say, "Oh, well, debate it with him." I don't need to debate it. I don't see the need to do that. I've said everything I need to say. Whatever, and maybe debate it. I don't know, whatever. But he should have been a little bit more definitive. But then what happens? So then iFly leaves, right? And they ask Ryan Stink his side of the story. Now this is the first time I've heard Ryan Stink talk, besides his YouTube videos, right? But like him talk about this situation. And the one thing I really noticed is that he's really vague about what's going on, and that bothered me because I felt like he knew what the crux of the argument was. He knew the purpose for what was happening, and he just skirted around it. And that's pretty shady when people do something like that. They asked him, why did I? Because two of the hosts on the podcast didn't know. They didn't know what was going on. And Raw Instinct, instead of saying just very clearly, iFly is accusing me of copying his videos, not just what they're about, but the way they're made, and the copying the content almost exactly. Instead of saying that, he said, well, iFly's mad because I guess I made a video that was kind of like his. And so then the podcast goes off into like this 30-minute, and I listened to the whole thing. I listened to the whole podcast. I want to make sure I got the whole content. But they go into this 30-minute rant, almost 30 minutes, about what it means to use content, and that some YouTubers feel like they own Call of Duty, and that if I make a video, one example they use is if I make a video about rainbows and you make a video about rainbows and you've stolen my content. That's not the issue at hand here. Neither is the like thing. iFly spent too much time on Raw Instinct not liking his video. He spent too much time there and made it sound like that was the crux, that was the central focal point of his video, but it wasn't. You have to watch it again. His big argument is that Raw Instinct is stealing content. It's not that he didn't like iFly's video. iFly was just trying to use that to attack the character of Raw Instinct, which was pointless. I don't think he should have done it, but whatever. So then they get in this big argument and this big debate or whatever. They're just talking about content or what it means to produce the similar content. And I just want to say right now again that the issue is not that the content is about the same thing. That happens all the time. Like whenever there's a bug in Modern Warfare, whenever someone figures something out, whenever there's a new patch, there are, hundreds of videos within 24 hours about that thing. About whatever that bug is, or about whatever that patch is, about whatever the new knowledge is. And a lot of them don't shout out. Now the biggest ones do, at least a little bit. Like for example, Woody. I've heard Woody say, hey guys, there's this new thing on YouTube and it's about the attack helicopter, so let's take a look at it. Right, whatever. At least he's saying that he didn't find it out on his own. At least he saw it somewhere else, at least in some capacity. Other times, people on YouTube will directly shout at someone else. Hey, I saw T. Martin talk about this. I want to tell you about it. And that, by the way, that is exactly how you can avoid these kind of situations. He's not required to give any shout out at all, right? And I agree with what TeamNoble said. He's not, by law, not required to. But by principle, he is required to. And there are laws about similar things, right? And so I know there's not a law that says if you make a Call of Duty video about this, someone else can't copy your Call of Duty video. But there is an intellectual property law, and there is law about, there's patent law, and there are laws in place for those kind of things to prevent that kind of stuff from happening. And you need to just take a look at that and then kind of mirror it and say, well, if there's a law in place that says if you write your own song, I cannot write the same song and claim it as my own. Right? I can't do that. You have the intellectual property rights on that song, on that collection of verses, on those lyrics attached with this melody. You have that intellectual property. And you should liken that to the YouTube videos. And you should say, okay, so if there's a law in place about that, probably it's not a good idea for me to copy somebody else's video content, even though there's not a law in place about it. It's similar enough, you should be careful. At the very least, just shout it out and say, hey, I saw this on iFly's channel. You don't need to shout them out necessarily. I probably wouldn't shout out and put like a YouTube bubble at the bottom of the screen, and I wouldn't do all this and that and the other. Leave it up to your commenters to do that, because they will. You know, if you say I saw this on iFly's stream, and then on someone comments and says, who's iFly? Someone else will figure, it'll work itself out. You know, that's easy to say something like that. And if you just give the shout out at least that much, at least a little bit, you avoid 95% of these problems, or even more. You avoid almost every one of these problems that could happen. So let's go back to the podcast, okay? So Rod was vague in the description of what happened, which led to this long debate on the wrong thing, which was kind of funny. I felt bad for the other hosts, because the other hosts didn't have the whole story, and I did feel bad for them because they debated about something that there was no debate about. It was pretty pointless. And so let's move on. Okay, so let's talk about. So another thing Rod Instinct said, that this was kind of a big thing, and I don't know if you guys caught this. It's about 10 minutes into this podcast. Rod Instinct said that he also had T. Martin message him about video content. Now later on, he says that T. Martin didn't like the fact that T. Martin himself was being tagged in Rod Instinct's videos. Right? He said that at the end of towards the end of the podcast. But at the 10-minute mark, he said that T. Martin messaged him about the content of his videos and about the thumbnails and about how it was similar, and he asked him to take down a video. And if that's true, it could be that Rod Instinct misspoke. But if that's true, then Rod Instinct already kind of got in trouble for this once, and he needed to stop. He should not have done that again. He should learn this lesson. And then he stole more, or he took more content. That's pretty scumbaggy. And let's see. Okay. The last thing I want to talk about is actually towards the beginning of the podcast, the reason that iFly ran away. And then towards the end, when he was invited back in, then decided not to go back in. I agree with iFly not doing that. And I'm going to give kind of a personal example. And this is probably going to offend people, but I really don't care. So I'm an atheist. And as an atheist, I get into religious debates quite a bit. I live in Utah, right? Mormonville. I get into religious debates a lot. There are some religious debates that are tougher than others. So, for example, one of them might be, how can you know that God didn't bless me by giving me this? That's tough to argue, right? But then there are other arguments, like that evolution did not happen. That's almost impossible to argue. And I know that sounds weird because there's so much evidence to back it up, but it's impossible to argue because no matter what you say, they just don't believe you. Right? And you're trying to argue with this religious person and say, no, we absolutely did it. We evolved from monkeys. You know, chimpanzees are our cousins. You can go look at the bones. You know, the bones are in the Smithsonian. Go look at them. And the Christian person will just say, nah, I don't believe it. And you look at them and you're like, what do you mean you don't believe it? Like, you can't just not believe it. Like, do you not believe that there's gravity? You don't believe that there's light? Like, evolution is as rock solid as that. And you can't just not believe it or not. But if you've ever had an argument like that, I think on the podcast, a good example, arguing with like a drunk woman, which is, kind of sexist or whatever. But the point is made, right? That when you have arguments like that against somebody who is uninformed to such a level that informing them yourself is not enough, they just won't believe you. And they'll start to argue about things that have no relevance. It's pointless. It's pointless. It's okay. A different example, not quite as personal, but I'm a Mac guy. I have my MacBook Pro here, but I also like PCs. I built my gaming computer. I like them both, right? If you've ever tried to argue with somebody who does not know about computers, argued one or the other, Mac or PC, and they don't know anything about computers, but they just picked one, that is frustrating as crap sometimes, right? Because you're trying to tell them, well, the internals are just about the same, but the Mac, it is more expensive, but you're also paying for this, that, and the other. Or you're on the PC side and you're saying, no, PCs are cheaper and less expensive because of this, that, and the other. And then the other person you're talking to is just like, yeah, I don't know anything about computers, but mine's better than yours because it's better, right? They're so uninformed, you just can't argue. You just can't. There's no point to arguing. And that's what happened on this podcast, is that iFly came in and then, Kism or whatever, Kisler. I'm sorry, I don't know your name. I should know it. Let me look at it because I want to give you the right. Keemstar, DJ Keemstar, started making these arguments, and he was just so off base, and he was like so misinformed that iFly left because there's no point to arguing with that. If you're not on the same page, if he's not caught up to where you are, or at least where your video was, there's no point in continuing. And I agree with iFly. I would have left. I would not have continued to argue there. Maybe a little bit longer. I probably would have at least tried. because I kind of enjoy arguing. But at a certain point, I would have done the same thing. I'd have been like, you know, you guys got to watch my video. You guys need to understand what's happening, and I'm just going to bounce because this is pointless. So, okay. So we talked about the podcast, talked about iFly's video, talked about TeamNoble's video, even though he cut it down. So what do I think? So I think the easiest way to avoid this is to just somehow generally shout out something when you learn. If you didn't learn it yourself, if you didn't find it yourself, just say something in your video. It takes 1 second to say, hey guys, I learned this from T. Martin and check it out. And then you can teach the same thing basically. But at least you've shouted out something, right? Now the other thing is don't copy videos in the way that Reinstein did. You know, going like from place to place to place, or doing it the same way, or using the same gun and using the same progression. It's just too easy. It's so obvious what's happening. Now, imagine, there's one video iFly shows about the whole reloading quicker without using sleight of hand. And he shows how he used the golden gun. I don't remember what gun it was. And he's shooting at a wall and, you know, just side by side and all that kind of stuff. And then Reinstein does the exact same thing with the same gun. It's golded and everything. It'd have been so much different if Reinstein would have said, hey guys, I saw this on someone else's channel. I can't remember where. Even if he says that, I can't remember where. At least he's saying, you know, something. So he says, you know, I saw this on someone else's channel, and this is what happened. So I'm just going to show you. And then he just has a different gun, and he just does it like it's his own thing. He learned how to reload quicker, but he didn't have to use the same gun, shoot at the same thing. And it's just too easy. It's just too obvious what's happening. So I think that's a really easy way to avoid it. Is first of all, at least somewhat cite where you got your ideas from, and second of all, don't copy the exact video structure. If you get an idea from somewhere else, then use the idea, use the information, because everyone deserves to know it, right? Not just his subscribers, but everyone deserves to know that information. Do it your own way. And then and the last thing is, when someone calls you out, just accept it. He should have just been like, yeah, you know what, you guys, you are absolutely right. Probably I didn't mean to, but I did this and that, and I'm going to do better. I'm going to stop doing that, and I really apologize. Done! Problem solved. And you can just move on with your life. So, let's see. I think I've gone over everything. That's how I feel about it all. I would love a video response from you guys if you feel differently. Or write in the comments down below. I'll respond. And let me know what you think. Peace out. Thanks.